The smell of stale coffee and fryer grease usually clung to Sarah's diner, a familiar comfort in the quiet, struggling town. But today, a different scent hung in the air. Grime, decay, and something metallic. It pulled her to the alley behind the diner, a place usually only visited by the garbage truck. There, slumped against the damp brick wall, was a man. He was clearly a former Navy SEAL, even in his current state. His tattered uniform, though stained and ripped, still bore the faded outline of a trident patch. His eyes, vacant and distant, stared at nothing, yet spoke volumes of a past that had once been sharp, disciplined, and now, utterly broken, he was dumped there, like trash. Just then, Mr. Henderson, the town's self-proclaimed savior and current tormentor, rounded the corner. He was a local businessman, always dressed in suits that felt too expensive for their dusty town, always with that smug look on his face. He'd been hounding Sarah for months, pushing her to sell the diner. His eyes landed on the injured man, then flicked to Sarah, a sneer twisting his lips. "Well, well, Sarah," he drawled, his voice dripping with false concern. "Look what the cat dragged in. Some trash truly belongs with trash. Wouldn't you agree?" He kicked lightly at a loose piece of brick near the man's foot, not even bothering to hide his disgust. "You're too kind, too naive, always seeing good where there isn't any." He made it sound like a weakness, like her compassion was something to be ashamed of. Sarah felt a familiar heat rise in her chest, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something harder, something colder. She looked Henderson directly in the eye, her jaw tight. Her voice came out quiet but firm, cutting through the alley's silence. "Some trash is treasure, Mr. Henderson, and some treasures are overlooked." She didn't flinch, didn't back down. The words surprised even herself, a defiance she hadn't known she possessed. Henderson paused, his smirk faltering for a split second. He wasn't used to Sarah talking back. Not like this. He recovered quickly, though, letting out a dismissive scoff. "Suit yourself, Sarah. Don't say I didn't warn you when you're left with nothing but a pile of junk." He turned, his expensive shoes scuffing on the uneven pavement, and began to walk away, his back radiating smug satisfaction. As he took a few steps, something small but significant happened. The alley wall, old and crumbling, chose that exact moment to shed a piece of itself. A loose brick, dislodged from its precarious perch, tumbled down. It narrowly missed Henderson's head, landing with a sharp crack just inches from his polished shoe. He yelped, stumbling forward, then looked back at the wall, a flicker of genuine surprise and irritation on his face. He shot Sarah a dirty look, as if it were her fault, before hurrying off down the alley, muttering under his breath. Sarah watched him go, a small, grim smile touching her lips. Poetic justice, she thought. She then turned her attention back to the man on the ground. The sun, finally breaking through the clouds, caught a determined glint in her eyes. This wasn't just about saving a stranger. This was about everything. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. This town, nestled deep in rural America, was a place that had seen better days. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and news traveled faster than the internet. Once, it had thrived, bustling with life around the big factory that employed most of its residents. But that factory had closed years ago, leaving behind empty buildings, quiet streets, and a pervasive sense of loss. People here were tough, resilient, used to hard work and pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. That was the local custom, a belief that you made your own way. But that toughness could also be harsh, especially when times were hard. Sarah had known this town her whole life. An orphan, she'd inherited the diner from her grandmother, the only family she'd ever really known. The diner wasn't just a business. It was a connection to her past, a piece of her grandmother's legacy she felt deeply responsible for. Every day was a grind. She worked long, exhausting hours, from before dawn until well after dark, trying to keep the place afloat. The bills piled up, and every month was a struggle just to break even. She worried constantly, the weight of the diner's survival pressing down on her shoulders. Most of the young people she'd grown up with had left, chasing better opportunities in bigger cities, leaving behind a quiet desperation that hung in the air like dust. Sarah's biggest vulnerability was her loneliness, a constant ache she tried to ignore. She also feared failure, terrified of letting down her grandmother's memory and proving all the doubters right. Deep down, she wanted to prove herself capable, to show everyone that a girl from humble beginnings could not only survive but thrive. Her dream was simple, yet ambitious: to revive the diner, to make it a true community hub once more. She wanted it to be a place of warmth, laughter, and stability in a town that desperately needed it, a beacon against the encroaching gloom. Mr. Henderson, the man who had just sneered at her compassion, represented everything Sarah stood against. He was a wealthy land developer, opportunistic and ruthless, seeing the town's decline not as a tragedy, but as a chance to make a quick buck. He saw cheap real estate, an opportunity to tear down history and build something new, something modern, something profitable for him. Sarah's diner stood directly in the way of his plans for a new commercial complex, a shining symbol of the past he wanted to erase. He embodied the external pressure, the constant threat to her dreams and her grandmother's legacy. The constant struggle to keep the diner afloat, coupled with Henderson's relentless pressure, created a simmering emotional tension within Sarah. It was like a pot slowly boiling, threatening to overflow. She felt overlooked, just like the injured man in the alley. Here was a forgotten hero, a man discarded like trash, in a forgotten town that was slowly being discarded itself. His situation mirrored her own fight against being ignored and pushed aside. She was fighting not just for a business, but for the soul of her town, and for her own place in it. The man, nameless and broken, was a stark reminder of what happened when people stopped caring, when they allowed greed to triumph over humanity. And Sarah, despite everything, was not ready to stop caring. Not yet. The pressures on Sarah weren't new. They had been building for months like a slow-moving storm. Mr. Henderson had first appeared like a benefactor, promising investments, talking about revitalizing the town, making it sound like he was on their side. But those promises had turned out to be empty, just a clever way to get his foot in the door. When his true intentions, to buy up property cheap and build his own complex, became clear, the disillusionment in the town was palpable. It left a bitter taste, and Sarah felt it keenly, adding to her own struggle. Henderson had a knack for veiled humiliations. He'd often drop by the diner, not to eat, but to make casual, condescending remarks. "Still clinging to this quaint little place, Sarah," he'd say, his eyes sweeping over the worn booths and faded decor. "It's sweet, I suppose, but hardly practical in this day and age." Or he'd talk about her naivety for trying to save a dying relic, usually when other customers were within earshot. Each comment, seemingly harmless, was a tiny chip at her confidence, designed to make her doubt herself, to make her feel foolish for trying. His manipulation was more insidious. He started by offering ridiculously low prices for the diner, knowing full well she would refuse. Then, he'd buy out neighboring, less stubborn businesses, one by one, slowly isolating the diner. He'd spread rumors too, whispers about the diner's impending closure, how it was only a matter of time before Sarah gave up. These rumors discouraged customers, making her already difficult financial situation even worse. People started avoiding the diner, not out of malice, but because they didn't want to get caught in the middle, or because they believed the rumors and assumed it wasn't worth their time. There were moments of blatant injustice that were clearly orchestrated. One time, a crucial permit she needed for a simple repair to the diner's roof was inexplicably delayed for weeks, costing her money and time. Another time, a health inspection, usually routine, suddenly became hypercritical, flagging minor issues that had never been a problem before. The inspector, a new face in town, seemed to be looking for reasons to find fault. Sarah knew, deep down, that Henderson was behind it all, pulling strings, using his influence to make her life as difficult as possible, without ever actually breaking the law. He exploited every legal loophole, every bureaucratic delay, to tighten the noose around her business. The small-town grapevine worked both ways. Rumors about Henderson's plans and Sarah's stubbornness spread quickly, amplifying the pressure. The town's economic fragility played right into his hands. His offers, however low, seemed tempting to others who were desperate, which only isolated Sarah further. People who had once been friendly started looking at her, with a mix of pity and frustration, wondering why she just wouldn't give in. But the discovery of the abandoned former Navy SEAL in the alley, coupled with Henderson's callous remark, was the ultimate insult. It wasn't just another blow, it was the last straw. It symbolized everything Sarah had been fighting against for so long. The casual disregard for human value, the way people were discarded when they were no longer useful, the relentless march of profit over people, over community, over decency. It wasn't an isolated incident, but the breaking point after years of erosion, of being chipped away at. Seeing that man, broken and alone, and then hearing Henderson's cruel words, ignited something fierce within her. It was a clear, undeniable reflection of the same disrespect he showed for her diner, and for the very soul of their struggling town. She knew then that she couldn't give up. Not now. The diner, once her sanctuary, now felt like a cage, its familiar walls closing in on her. The heavy, unsustainable emotional atmosphere weighed on Sarah every single day. The few regular customers who still came in spoke in hushed tones, their eyes filled with a mix of sympathy and apprehension, whispering about the diner's inevitable closure. Sarah felt constantly watched, judged by everyone, not just by Henderson. It was like living under a microscope, every move scrutinized, every decision questioned. The confrontations with Henderson grew more frequent, his veiled threats no longer so veiled. He'd stop by, not to eat, but to lean against the counter, a smug look on his face, and talk about progress and inevitable change. He started sending official-looking letters, filled with legal jargon, hinting at zoning violations or property disputes. She knew they were mostly empty threats, but they still chipped away at her peace of mind. Then his associates started showing up, not doing anything specific, just loitering near the diner, sometimes parking their cars across the street for hours. Their presence was a constant, intimidating reminder of his power, a silent message that he was always watching. The social pressure from the town itself intensified. Neighbors, some genuinely concerned, others clearly influenced by Henderson's narrative, started questioning her stubbornness. "Why not just sell, Sarah? It's a losing battle," they'd say, their voices tinged with pity. You're only hurting yourself, holding on to something that's already gone. It was hard to hear, especially from people she'd known her whole life. They saw her as foolishly sentimental, clinging to a lost cause, or stubbornly defiant, refusing to see reason. Very few saw her as a fighter, as someone standing up for what was right. Henderson's demeanor shifted completely. He stopped pretending to be reasonable, dropping the facade of the benevolent developer. His offers became ultimatums, his words sharper, laced with an open aggression that left no doubt about his intentions. He made it clear he would do whatever it took to get the diner. There were rumors he was trying to sabotage the diner's reputation more directly, spreading false stories about food safety or poor service. One day, a local newspaper ran a small, unflattering piece about the struggling diner and its outmoded business model, clearly planted by Henderson. Sarah felt the immense burden of judgment from the entire town. She was no longer just fighting Henderson. She was fighting the whispers, the pitying glances, the subtle pressure to conform. The injured man from the alley, whom she had brought into the small apartment above the diner and was slowly nursing back to health, became another target of these whispers. Why is she helping him? He's a nobody, people would say, their voices carrying through the thin walls of the diner. Another mouth to feed, another burden. It was as if her act of kindness was being used against her, another sign of her supposed foolishness. This period was a blur of sleepless nights and constant anxiety. Sarah would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing, replaying conversations, trying to anticipate Henderson's next move. Moments of despair were frequent, overwhelming waves that made her question everything. There were times she considered giving up, just walking away, letting go of the diner, of her grandmother's legacy, of her own dreams. The pressure was immense, a feeling of being completely cornered with no escape, like a wild animal trapped with no way out. She felt an emotional suffocation, as if the air itself was thick with judgment and expectation. The weight of it all was almost unbearable, pushing her closer and closer to a breaking point. One evening, while Sarah was carefully cleaning the wound on David's arm, a small, worn leather wallet slipped from an inside pocket of his tattered jacket. She hadn't gone through his things before, respecting his privacy, but now it lay open on the small table. A faded military ID card stared back at her, showing a younger, sharper David, his rank clearly visible. He wasn't just any soldier. He was a decorated Navy SEAL. Her hands trembled slightly as she found other documents tucked inside. Commendations for valor, but also official papers detailing a dishonorable discharge. The reddish hue of Mars became more pronounced, filling my entire vision. It wasn't just a distant orb anymore. It was close, massive, and incredibly detailed. I felt a strange sensation, like passing through a veil, a shimmering, invisible barrier that separated the raw vacuum of space from something else. It felt like entering a protected, unknown territory, a place hidden from the casual observer. There was no jolt, no sound, just a smooth transition, as if the very fabric of reality shifted to accommodate our passage. The energetic vessel, which I now understood wasn't a ship in the human sense, but more of a consciousness conduit, descended slowly and precisely. It moved towards a specific point on the Martian surface, but there was no visible landing strip or entrance. Instead, I saw a shimmering, almost invisible opening, a distortion in the reddish landscape that hinted at a hidden gateway. The alien projected a sense of profound secrecy and ancient protection surrounding this entrance. It was clear this was not a place meant for discovery by chance. A chill ran down my spine, a mix of awe at the technology and a deep trepidation about what secrets lay behind that veiled threshold. It was like standing before a door to another world, knowing that once I stepped through, nothing would be the same. Then came the sensation of passing through solid rock, yet without any physical impact. It was as if my essence, guided by the alien, simply phased through the Martian crust. The surrounding environment transformed from the barren, dusty Martian landscape to intricate, crystalline tunnels. These weren't rough-hewn caves. They were perfectly formed, almost sculpted, glowing with an internal luminescence. The light pulsed softly, organically, a living glow that painted the crystal surfaces in shifting hues of blues, purples, and greens. The air around me, which I hadn't noticed before, became noticeably warmer, carrying a faint metallic scent that was both alien and strangely inviting. It felt like entering the veins of a living planet, a journey into its very core. The tunnels widened dramatically, revealing vast caverns that stretched beyond my immediate sight, disappearing into the luminous distance. These were not empty spaces. They were filled with massive, naturally formed crystal structures that rose majestically from the floor and hung like colossal chandeliers from the ceiling. They shimmered and refracted the organic light, creating a breathtaking display. The caverns were not dormant either. They were alive with complex, flowing energy patterns, like invisible currents moving through the air, creating a subtle hum that resonated deep within my being. It was the undeniable sense of an ancient, living ecosystem existing beneath the surface, a hidden world thriving in conditions unimaginable to those on the surface. Beyond these magnificent caverns, a breathtaking city began to emerge. It was unlike any city I had ever seen, or even ruthless actions and the discovery of the Old Town Charter shattered the cycle of suffering she had been trapped in. It transformed Sarah from a victim, constantly reacting to Henderson's pressure, into an active participant, ready to leverage the truth and the law. She felt a surge of adrenaline, a sense of purpose she hadn't known in years. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she had a chance. Sarah felt a whirlwind of emotions after finding the charter and learning more about David. Fear of Henderson's retaliation was a constant shadow, a cold knot in her stomach. Could she really go up against someone so powerful? Someone who clearly had no limits? Doubts about her own ability gnawed at her. She was just a diner owner, not a lawyer or a politician. Moments of shame surfaced when she overheard whispers in town about her crazy plan. People thought she was deluded, that she should just give up. But beneath the fear and doubt, an overwhelming anger simmered, a fierce determination that surprised even herself. This wasn't just about her anymore, or even David. It was about standing up to a bully, for justice, for her community. The weight of David's past, his unjust discharge, and her newfound responsibility to him pressed down on her, sometimes making it hard to breathe. As news of Sarah's refusal to sell spread and her unexpected discovery of the charter, the town began to react. Some secondary characters, those who remembered the town before Henderson, started to emerge from the shadows. Old Mr. Abernathy, who used to be a regular at the diner before his health failed, sent his granddaughter over with a box of old legal texts. He was a retired lawyer, mostly forgotten, but his mind was still sharp. He offered to look over the charter, his eyes twinkling with a long dormant fire. Mrs. Gable, a quiet woman who baked the best apple pies, started bringing over extra casseroles, a silent show of support. "Don't you worry, dear," she'd say, patting Sarah's arm. "Some of us remember what this town used to be, and what Henderson did to it." David, still recovering but gaining strength each day, became a quiet, powerful ally. He didn't say much, but his presence was a constant reminder of their shared fight. He watched Sarah, observing her struggle, and slowly, his former military discipline began to resurface. He started organizing the documents, creating timelines, thinking strategically. His purpose, shattered by his discharge, was slowly piecing itself back together through helping Sarah. But not everyone was sympathetic. Some town council members, who had always seemed to defer to Henderson, became openly hostile. Mr. Davies, a councilman Sarah had known since childhood, suddenly started finding fault with every minor detail of the diner's operations. He'd try to block her efforts to get permits for minor repairs, citing obscure regulations. Even some seemingly neutral neighbors, fearing Henderson's wrath or hoping to curry favor, started to distance themselves. They'd avoid eye contact, cross the street, or offer hollow apologies about not wanting to get involved. The small-town American dynamic played out in full force. Word of mouth became critical. Sarah's story, of a young woman standing up to a powerful developer, began to spread, galvanizing a quiet, simmering support among those who felt powerless. The value placed on local heroes and standing up to the big guy resonated deeply. But Henderson, too, was working the grapevine, spreading rumors designed to discredit her, painting her as an irrational, sentimental fool. Fear of economic reprisal kept many others silent, afraid to openly defy the man who controlled so much of the town's dwindling economy. Sarah battled severe anxiety and self-doubt. There were nights she couldn't sleep, replaying conversations, imagining Henderson's next move. The stakes were higher than ever. It wasn't just her diner. It was her entire future, David's future, and maybe even the town's future. The feeling of being an underdog against such a powerful system was immense, almost crushing. But then she'd look at David, or think of her grandmother, and remember why she was fighting. David, in turn, continued to observe her, his silent support a steady anchor. He began strategizing, drawing on his military training, helping Sarah organize her thoughts and her evidence. He was finding his own purpose again, helping her navigate the complex, often intimidating, path ahead. Sarah, with David's quiet support and the growing help of her newfound allies, meticulously built her case. The diner, once a place of comfort and routine, had transformed into a war room. Documents were spread across tables. Highlighted sections of the dusty town charter were taped to the walls, and David's fragmented memories of his past were carefully pieced together. He remembered names, dates, and faces. Details that, when combined with Sarah's research into Henderson's business dealings, began to paint a clear picture of manipulation and injustice. Mr. Abernathy, the retired lawyer, became an invaluable guide, helping them understand the legal language and strategize their approach. He still moved slowly, but his mind was sharp as ever, cutting through legal jargon to find the leverage they needed. The climax arrived in a packed town hall meeting, specifically called to address the future of the town square, which Henderson intended to develop. He had expected a rubber stamp approval, another easy victory, but Sarah and David were ready. Sarah, her voice clear, despite her nervousness, presented the historical charter. She explained how it safeguarded community assets, including the diner, under conditions that Henderson's proposed development clearly violated. Then David stood up. He didn't speak with military precision, but with a quiet, undeniable authority. He laid out the details of his own unjust discharge, connecting the dots between the powerful figure who orchestrated it and Henderson's own shady business practices. He showed how Henderson had used similar tactics, exploiting vulnerabilities and manipulating regulations, not just against Sarah, but against others in the town for years. Henderson, initially sneering, grew visibly agitated. His attempts to discredit them backfired spectacularly. He called Sarah naive, dismissed David as a disgruntled ex-soldier. But the evidence was too strong, too well-researched. Mr. Abernathy calmly countered each of Henderson's blustering claims with legal precedent and facts. The town, now fully aware of Henderson's true nature, of the years of veiled threats and broken promises, turned against him. Whispers grew into murmurs, then into outright shouts of disapproval. People who had been silent for years found their voices, sharing their own stories of Henderson's intimidation and exploitation. The town council, faced with overwhelming public sentiment and irrefutable evidence, had no choice. Henderson's development proposal for the town square was rejected. More significantly, the historical charter was officially recognized and reinforced, protecting the diner and other community properties from future predatory development. Henderson faced legal repercussions, not just for his business practices, but for the exposure of his connections to David's unjust discharge. The public scandal, coupled with the legal pressure, forced him to retreat from the town, his empire, built on manipulation and fear, beginning to crumble. He might not have gone to jail, but his power over the town was broken, and his reputation was in tatters. The diner was saved, protected by the very history Sarah had fought to preserve. David's name was cleared, his military record officially reviewed and corrected, acknowledging his honorable service. He found a new purpose, not just working at the diner, but becoming a quiet advocate for veterans' rights, using his experience to help others navigate the complex system. The town, having witnessed Sarah's courage and the power of unity, began a slow but steady process of healing and rebuilding. The diner, more than ever, became its heart, a symbol of resilience, community, and the triumph of integrity. The story concluded with Sarah, now confident and respected, looking out at her bustling diner. It was a Friday night, and every table was full. Laughter and conversation filled the air, a stark contrast to the quiet desperation that had once hung heavy. David was behind the counter, efficiently taking orders, a subtle smile on his face. Sarah reflected on how an act of simple kindness, offering a meal and a bed to a discarded stranger, had led to the rediscovery of her own strength and the revitalization of her community. It was a testament to the idea that true value lay not in wealth or power, but in compassion, integrity, and the courage to fight for what was right even when the odds seemed impossible. The town had found its way back, and Sarah, the girl who refused to sell, had led them there.